Calm certainty reveals that someone never lost it in the first place. Think about the people who are rarely disrespected. It is not because they are physically stronger or socially more important. It is because others instinctively understand that crossing their boundaries always comes with a cost. That cost is not revenge. It is not drama. It is the immediate loss of trust, access, attention, or opportunity. People quickly learn that disrespect changes the relationship. Once that lesson is understood, they begin thinking twice before repeating the same mistake. This is how real authority is established, not by making people fear your temper, but by making them respect your standards. Human psychology follows consequences more than words. You can tell someone to respect you 100 times, but if your behavior never changes after they ignore you, your words become meaningless. On the other hand, one calm action often carries more weight than 100 emotional speeches. When someone repeatedly dismisses your time and you quietly stop making yourself available, they notice. When someone constantly speaks to you without respect and you reduce your interaction instead of arguing endlessly, they notice. When someone discovers that every act of disrespect costs them your trust or your presence, they begin adjusting their behavior. They are no longer reacting to your words. They are reacting to your standards. Many people believe fear is created through aggression. In reality, aggression often exposes insecurity. Someone who explodes over every small issue becomes predictable. Others learn exactly how to provoke them and exactly how long the anger will last. Calm people are different. Their reactions are measured, which makes them impossible to manipulate. No one knows exactly what they will do, but everyone knows they will not ignore disrespect. That uncertainty creates caution, and caution is far more powerful than intimidation because it forces people to think before they act. Another mistake is giving endless second chances without any visible change in your own behavior. Forgiveness is valuable when it follows accountability, but forgiveness without standards becomes permission. If every insult is excused, every promise is forgotten, and every boundary is crossed without consequence, people naturally assume there are no real boundaries at all. They stop asking themselves whether they should disrespect you because experience has already answered the question. They know nothing will happen. This does not mean becoming cold or suspicious of everyone. It means valuing yourself enough to understand that respect begins with what you refuse to tolerate. The moment people realize your principles cannot be negotiated for approval, their entire approach changes. They become more thoughtful with their words, more careful with their actions, and more aware that every decision they make around you has consequences. That is the difference between someone who demands respect and someone who naturally commands it. Because the moment people realize that even the smallest act of disrespect costs them something valuable, they begin fearing the consequences of crossing your boundaries before they ever think about crossing them. One of the greatest illusions people believe is that power comes from winning arguments, raising their voice, or proving they cannot be intimidated. But real power is far quieter than that. It begins with emotional control. The moment another person can make you angry on command, make you desperate for approval, or force you to defend yourself emotionally, they have already gained influence over you. This is why people continue disrespecting certain individuals while becoming extremely careful around others. The difference is not physical strength or social status. The difference is emotional predictability. If someone knows exactly how you will react, they know exactly how to control the situation. Human nature is always looking for weaknesses. Some people do it intentionally, while others do it without even realizing it. They tease, criticize, interrupt, challenge, or ignore you simply to observe your response. They are not always trying to hurt you. Often, they are trying to discover where your emotional limits are. The moment they realize a few words can make you lose your composure, they unconsciously recognize that they possess power over you. Once they discover that weakness, many will continue testing it because people naturally repeat what gives them influence. This is why emotionally reactive people are often disrespected repeatedly. Every outburst teaches others exactly which buttons to press. Every defensive explanation reveals insecurity. Every desperate attempt to prove your worth tells people that your confidence depends on their opinion. Instead of creating fear, emotional reactions create familiarity. People stop respecting your presence because they already know how to control your emotions. You become predictable, and predictability is the enemy of authority. Now compare that to someone who remains completely composed under pressure. They are criticized, yet they do not rush to defend themselves. They are challenged, yet they refuse to react impulsively. They are underestimated, yet they continue speaking with the same calm confidence. Suddenly, the entire psychological balance changes. The person attempting to provoke them begins feeling uncertain. They expected anger but found patience. They expected desperation but found self-control. They expected a fight but found silence. That uncertainty creates caution, and caution is the first step toward respect. Many people misunderstand calmness. They mistake it for weakness because it lacks drama. But calmness backed by self-respect is one of the strongest psychological signals a person can send. It communicates that your emotions are not available for manipulation. It tells others that they cannot control your decisions simply by controlling the atmosphere around you. This is exactly why emotionally disciplined individuals are rarely targeted repeatedly. People quickly realize there is no emotional reward for provoking them. Fear is not created because people think you might explode. Fear is created because they realize their usual tactics no longer work on you. Imagine someone trying to embarrass you in front of others. If you immediately become angry, argue loudly, or desperately defend yourself, they have succeeded. They controlled your emotional state in front of everyone. But if you remain composed, answer only when necessary, or calmly remove yourself from the situation, they lose the psychological advantage they were hoping to gain. Instead of making you look weak, they expose themselves as the one seeking attention. This emotional discipline also changes the way people evaluate risk. Before speaking disrespectfully, they begin asking themselves an unconscious question. Will this person react emotionally, or will my behavior have consequences? Once they understand that you cannot be emotionally manipulated, they become far more careful. Not because they fear your anger, but because they cannot predict how you will calmly protect your boundaries. That uncertainty makes careless disrespect feel risky. Another mistake many people make is trying to prove strength through intimidation. They believe that becoming louder, harsher, or more aggressive will stop others from disrespecting them. Sometimes it works temporarily, but only because people fear the outburst, not the person. Over time, they learn that anger is simply another predictable pattern. They wait until the emotion fades and then everything returns to normal. Lasting respect is never built on emotional explosions. It is built on consistent emotional discipline. When your emotions remain steady, your decisions become stronger. You stop reacting to insults that are designed only to distract you. You stop defending yourself against every opinion because you understand that not every opinion deserves your attention. You begin choosing your responses instead of allowing others to choose them for you. That shift changes your entire presence. People notice that they cannot shake your confidence with criticism, cannot control you with praise, and cannot provoke you into making careless decisions. They realize that disrespect no longer gives them power over you. It only costs them access to someone who refuses to be manipulated. Because the moment people understand that your emotions are beyond their control, they begin thinking twice before disrespecting you, knowing they have nothing to gain and everything to lose. One of the most powerful weapons you can possess is one that most people underestimate every single day. It is not aggression. It is not intimidation. It is not the ability to argue better than everyone else. It is silence. In a world where people rush to explain themselves, defend every accusation, and react to every opinion, the person who knows when to remain silent immediately becomes different. Human nature expects predictable reactions. When someone disrespects you, they expect anger. When they criticize you, they expect a defense. When they challenge your authority, they expect you to fight for your position. The moment you refuse to give them the reaction they anticipated, you take control of the psychological balance. Most acts of disrespect are not random. They are carefully disguised tests. Sometimes they are intentional, and sometimes they happen unconsciously. A person interrupts you repeatedly to see whether you will tolerate it. Someone makes a sarcastic comment to measure your confidence. Another person questions your decision in front of others simply to observe how much pressure you can handle. They are gathering information. Every reaction you give becomes another clue about your emotional state, your confidence, and your boundaries. The more information you reveal, the easier you become to understand. And once people completely understand your reactions, they know exactly how to influence you. This is why powerful individuals never rush to respond. They understand that immediate reactions are usually emotional reactions, and emotional reactions often reveal more than they solve. Instead of speaking first, they observe. They pay attention to tone, timing, body language, and intention. They ask themselves a simple question before responding: is this person seeking understanding, or are they seeking control? That single moment of observation prevents countless unnecessary conflicts. More importantly, it prevents others from pulling you into emotional battles that were designed to weaken your position from the beginning. Silence creates something that arguments never can. It creates pressure. When people expect resistance but receive calm silence instead, their confidence begins to shift. They start questioning themselves. They replay what they said in their own mind. They wonder whether they misjudged you. Human psychology dislikes uncertainty. The mind naturally tries to fill empty spaces with explanations. If you immediately explain yourself, people stop thinking because you have already provided all the answers. But when you remain composed and allow silence to exist, they begin creating those answers themselves. Very often, they become far more uncomfortable than they would have if you had argued back. This does not mean silence should become an excuse for weakness. There is a difference between remaining silent because you are afraid and remaining silent because you are in control. Fear avoids conflict because it lacks confidence. Strength delays its response because it refuses to surrender control. The powerful person understands that not every disrespectful moment deserves an immediate reply. Sometimes the greatest display of authority is allowing the other person to expose their own character while you refuse to lower yourself to their level. Observation is just as important as silence. While emotional people focus on defending themselves, disciplined people focus on gathering information. They notice who consistently interrupts others. They notice who speaks respectfully only when it benefits them. They notice who changes behavior depending on the audience. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to understand human nature rather than simply participate in it. This knowledge becomes a source of quiet power because the person who understands others usually stays one step ahead of those who only think about themselves. Another mistake many people make is believing they must win every confrontation to earn respect. In reality, constant arguing often reduces respect. The more desperately you fight to prove your point, the more it appears that your confidence depends on convincing everyone else. Truly respected individuals know that some people are not interested in truth. They are interested in reaction. They provoke because they enjoy the emotional response, not because they seek resolution. The moment you recognize this, you stop giving them the reward they were hoping for. Over time, people begin noticing a pattern in your behavior. They realize you do not react impulsively. You do not defend yourself against every criticism. You do not allow disrespect to dictate your emotions. Instead, you remain calm, observe carefully, and respond only when your response has purpose. That consistency creates uncertainty in the minds of others. They can no longer predict whether you will speak, remain silent, leave the situation, or calmly enforce a boundary. Because they cannot predict you, they become much more careful before attempting to challenge or disrespect you again. Remember, the goal is not to make people fear your words. Words can be forgotten, debated, or ignored. The goal is to make people fear misjudging someone who never reacts emotionally, who always observes before acting, and whose silence often carries consequences they cannot immediately see. That kind of presence forces others to think before they speak, because they understand that every action around you is being noticed, even when nothing is being said. Because when your silence creates more pressure than another person's argument, people begin fearing the consequences of disrespecting you long before they ever act. One of the greatest misconceptions about respect is the belief that you can force people to value you by staying longer, explaining more, or trying harder to fix every relationship. In reality, the opposite is often true. The more desperately you hold on to people who repeatedly disrespect you, the more they begin to believe that you will never leave, no matter how poorly they treat you. Human nature quickly adapts to what it believes is guaranteed. When your time, attention, and presence are always available, regardless of how someone behaves, they stop treating those things as valuable. They become expectations instead of privileges. This is why the willingness to walk away is one of the strongest forms of psychological power. People rarely fear disrespecting someone who never leaves. They fear disrespecting the person who calmly removes their presence the moment respect disappears. There is a profound difference between threatening to leave and quietly doing it. Threats are often emotional attempts to regain control. Quiet distance is a demonstration that your standards are not open for negotiation. It tells people that your self-respect is worth more than their approval. Once they recognize this, they begin understanding that every act of disrespect carries a real consequence, not anger, not revenge, but the loss of access to someone they once took for granted. Most individuals remain in unhealthy situations for one reason. They mistake availability for loyalty. They believe proving their commitment means tolerating behavior that slowly destroys their dignity. They continue answering every message, accepting every apology without change, and giving endless opportunities to people who have shown no intention of respecting them. Unfortunately, this teaches others a dangerous lesson. It teaches them that no matter how they behave, your presence is guaranteed. And when something becomes guaranteed, people naturally stop appreciating it. Human psychology has always assigned greater value to what can be lost. Think about any opportunity that suddenly disappears. The moment access is no longer certain, appreciation begins to grow. The same principle applies to your presence. If someone knows they can ignore you, disrespect you, and still receive the same attention tomorrow, there is no reason for them to change. But the moment they realize their actions have permanently changed your level of access, they begin questioning the choices that brought them there. The consequence forces reflection in a way that arguments rarely do. Walking away is not about punishing others. It is about protecting yourself. Too many people remain where they are constantly disrespected because they fear loneliness more than they value peace. They convince themselves that any relationship is better than no relationship. But every day you spend in an environment that repeatedly ignores your worth slowly reshapes the way you see yourself. You begin accepting treatment that once would have shocked you. Standards that were once firm become flexible. Over time, your own mind starts believing that this is simply what you deserve. That is the true danger of remaining where respect no longer exists. Powerful people understand that their greatest resource is not money or influence. It is their attention. Wherever your attention goes, your energy follows. If you continue investing your time in people who consistently disrespect you, you are spending your most valuable resource on those who have already proven they do not deserve it. Instead, disciplined individuals quietly redirect that energy toward environments, relationships, and goals that reinforce their value rather than diminish it. This simple decision transforms not only how others see them, but how they see themselves. There is another psychological effect that occurs when you calmly walk away from disrespect. You become unpredictable. Most people expect arguments, emotional conversations, or repeated attempts to fix the situation. When none of those happen, uncertainty takes their place. They begin asking themselves why you left so calmly. They wonder whether they underestimated your standards. They replay their own behavior because your silence leaves them with questions instead of emotional drama. Questions remain in the mind much longer than arguments ever do. This does not mean abandoning every relationship after the first disagreement. Life requires patience, communication, and forgiveness. But there is a clear difference between occasional mistakes and repeated disrespect. Honest mistakes deserve conversation. Repeated disrespect deserves consequences. The strongest consequence is not anger. It is refusing to continue rewarding behavior that violates your principles. That decision communicates more than any speech ever could. It tells others that respect is the price of continued access to your life. As you begin protecting your presence instead of giving it away freely, something remarkable changes. People become more mindful of how they speak to you. They recognize that your attention is earned, not assumed. They stop viewing your availability as a certainty and start viewing it as something valuable that can be lost. That shift alone changes the entire balance of every relationship. People no longer think only about what they can gain from you. They begin thinking about what they could lose by disrespecting you. Because the moment people realize that disrespect costs them your presence, your time, and your trust, they begin fearing the consequences of losing access to you more than the satisfaction of crossing your boundaries. Many people believe respect is won in a single moment. They imagine one powerful speech, one act of courage, or one confrontation will permanently change how others see them. But human nature does not work that way. People do not judge you by isolated moments. They judge you by patterns. They watch how consistently you behave under pressure, how firmly you protect your boundaries, and whether your actions remain the same when circumstances become uncomfortable. This is why the people others fear disrespecting are not those who occasionally appear strong. They are the ones whose reputation has made their standards impossible to misunderstand. Your reputation is built long before you enter the room. Every interaction leaves behind a memory, and over time those memories form a picture in the minds of others. If your reputation is that you constantly forgive without change, avoid difficult conversations, or compromise your principles to keep people happy, others naturally become more comfortable crossing your boundaries. They may not even think they are doing anything wrong because experience has already taught them there are no lasting consequences. But if your reputation is built on calm consistency, everything changes. People begin adjusting their behavior before they even speak to you because they already know what you will and will not tolerate. One of the greatest mistakes people make is acting differently depending on who they are with. They protect their boundaries around strangers, but abandon them around friends. They remain confident in public, but become desperate for approval in private. They speak about self-respect until someone important disapproves of them, and suddenly their standards disappear. This inconsistency destroys authority because it tells people that your principles are negotiable. Human psychology respects consistency more than perfection. People trust those whose values remain steady regardless of the situation. This is why powerful individuals never build their reputation through intimidation. They build it through reliability. If they say they will not accept disrespect, their actions always match those words. If someone repeatedly crosses a boundary, they calmly reduce their trust, their availability, or their involvement. They do not make dramatic announcements, and they do not seek sympathy from others. They simply allow their behavior to reflect their principles. Over time, people stop testing them because the outcome is no longer uncertain. They already know disrespect will quietly cost them something valuable. Fear is strongest when it is based on certainty rather than emotion. Imagine someone known for unpredictable anger. People may avoid upsetting them, but only because they fear an emotional explosion. That fear disappears once they realize the anger eventually fades and nothing truly changes. Compare that to someone who rarely becomes emotional but never compromises their standards. Everyone understands that crossing this person has lasting consequences. Trust is reduced, access changes, opportunities disappear, relationships shift. There is no argument, no drama, and no public scene. Just a quiet decision that cannot be negotiated. That is the kind of reputation people remember because it is built on discipline instead of emotion. Another reason reputation matters is that people constantly learn from watching how you respond to others. Even those who have never disrespected you are paying attention. They notice whether you ignore repeated disrespect or calmly address it. They notice whether your boundaries exist only in conversation or in your behavior as well. Every decision becomes part of your reputation. Without realizing it, You are teaching everyone around you what happens when someone crosses your standards. Those silent lessons shape future interactions long before they ever occur. Building this kind of reputation requires patience. It cannot be created overnight. Every time you choose self-respect over approval, you strengthen it. Every time you refuse to explain yourself endlessly, you strengthen it. Every time you remain calm while enforcing a boundary instead of reacting emotionally, you strengthen it. Small actions repeated consistently become a powerful identity. Eventually, people stop questioning whether you will protect your standards because they have seen enough evidence to answer that question themselves. As your reputation grows, something remarkable happens. You spend less time defending yourself because your past behavior speaks before you do. New people quickly understand how to treat you because they observe how others interact with you. Existing relationships become healthier because expectations are clear. Those who once looked for weakness begin looking for ways to maintain your respect instead. The psychological balance changes completely. Instead of wondering how much disrespect they can get away with, they begin wondering whether one careless decision could permanently damage the relationship. Remember, the goal is never to make people fear you as a person. Fear created by intimidation is temporary and fragile. The goal is to build a reputation so consistent that people fear the consequences of disrespecting your standards. They understand that you cannot be manipulated, persuaded, or pressured into abandoning your principles simply because someone feels entitled to your attention. Because when your reputation consistently proves that every act of disrespect carries a lasting consequence, people begin thinking twice before crossing your boundaries in the first place. The highest form of power is not making people regret disrespecting you through anger, revenge, or endless arguments. It is making them realize that disrespecting you was the greatest mistake they could have made because they underestimated the person you were becoming. Most people waste years trying to prove their worth to those who doubted them. They replay old conversations in their minds, imagine winning every argument, and dream about the day they can finally show everyone they were wrong. But the irony of human nature is that the people who chase revenge often become trapped by the very people they claim to have left behind. Their success is no longer their own. It becomes a reaction to someone else's opinion. True power begins the moment you stop asking, how do I make them regret disrespecting me? And start asking, how do I become so valuable that disrespecting me naturally becomes a costly mistake? These are two completely different paths. The first keeps your attention fixed on your critics. The second keeps your attention fixed on your growth. One is driven by emotion, the other is driven by purpose. And purpose always outlasts emotion. Many people believe the perfect response to disrespect is a clever comeback or a public victory. They think if they can embarrass the other person, they have regained their power. But victories built on pride rarely last. Human psychology remembers results far longer than arguments. A person may forget what you said during a confrontation, but they will never forget watching you quietly build a life that exceeded every expectation they had of you. Success has a unique psychological effect. It forces people to question the judgments they once felt certain about. Without saying a word, your achievements become evidence that their opinion was incomplete. This is why disciplined people never allow disrespect to distract them from their long-term mission. Every insult becomes fuel instead of a burden. Every rejection becomes another reason to become stronger. Every attempt to diminish them becomes another reminder that their greatest responsibility is not changing other people's minds, it is changing the quality of their own life. They understand that time is their greatest advantage. While others remain focused on temporary conflicts, they continue developing knowledge, discipline, influence, and character. Months or years later, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. There is another reason success creates respect more effectively than confrontation. It cannot be argued with. People can dismiss your opinions, question your intentions, or criticize your personality. But consistent excellence becomes increasingly difficult to deny. When your life reflects discipline, emotional control, confidence, and purpose, even those who once underestimated you are forced to acknowledge the transformation. They may never admit they were wrong, but their behavior changes. They begin speaking